Okay, good evening, everyone. Am I heard good? Okay. So I'll squeeze the 20 minutes talk that I prepared into 15 minutes. I'll get right away into the topic. In my field trip to Rwanda, actually, just before going, I was thinking about what's the question I would like to investigate the most, and I was very much fascinated with the writings of Phil Clark about the Gacaca courts. That formed a little bit of bias to me, so I went to Rwanda with some kind of decision of what would be the best for Rwandans, what is the best mechanism to handle all the cases from the genocide in '94. So since the Gacaca courts represent actually the more of the Rwandan conflict resolution traditions as compared to the Western legal system of that the ICTR represents, I'll discuss it also now, but I discussed it in my paper back then as a comparison between the two. And that's the title of my paper, was actually with a little bit of assumption that the Gacaca courts bring something that the ICTR lacks. And it was, what do the traditional Gacaca courts bring that the ICTR lack in achieving transitional justice? So as I said, as an outsider, witnessing the post-conflict processes in Rwanda, trying to achieve the goals of transitional justice, which is justice, peace, truth, and reconciliation, we might assume that the setting that was chosen back then was the right one, which is, I'm referring to the three mechanisms that were mainly set to hold the trials for the genocide. First, the ICTR, second, the Gacaca courts, and third, the Rwandan national courts. But I'll compare between the first two. Now, I was introduced to the various advantages of the Gacaca courts with reading about them before, and with the lectures we got by Sigal, and with reading a lot about what has happened. And I actually decided that I had an idea in my mind that the ICTR, President Johansson, should have been cancelled. All the cases should have been transferred to the Gacaca court. But yes, but later on I'm gonna give more credit to the ICTR. So that was my first opinion about it. And actually, yeah, I thought it was that simple. Then when coming to Rwanda, I was going around with a lot of questions about the ICTR and a lot of questions about the Gacaca that I actually presented to people that we met. The question marks I had about the ICTR functioning were actually, and they directed my research, is the punitive approach of the ICTR able to achieve reconciliation? Is it able to push forward for peace? Is it able to induce healing? Is it able to foster integration back to the society of regretting perpetrators? Is it able to promote forgiveness? Is it able to mitigate the feelings of anger and revenge of victims to reassure the prevention of recurrence? As you may guess, my answer to those questions was no. But with every single person that we met, and I've asked questions about how they perceive actually the contribution of the Gacaca courts to achieving transitional justice. And apart from the question marks that I had about the ICTR functioning, I could learn and actually see that there are few motives, and I'll mention mainly three motives of expressing the cultural context that were special to the Gacaca courts, that has brought benefit or has brought contribution that the Gacaca court had, but the ICTR didn't offer. So starting with the first one, I'll go through the three motives, discussing what benefits actually they offered. So the first one was public hearing. And public hearing is actually thought to be the most innovative element that the Gacaca courts brought to the judging process. When established, the Gacaca courts were set in a fixed time and day, and everybody in the community was obliged to come and participate. It was actually an obligation by law that everybody needs to attend. The public hearing allowed the victims to tell their story to the whole community, and that was done with no interpretation, as might be the case in the court, where the lawyers stop the witnesses and ask them questions. A very powerful experience of justice was made towards the victims, as it could heal the humiliation with the true regret or apology that was made by some of the perpetrators. The publicity actually gave a wide acknowledgement of the victim's sorrow and agony for losing their loved ones, and it also allowed a wide exposure of the truth. That was something that is especially important because actually everybody there was witness, everybody heard, everybody knew, and it gave a chance for the perpetrators who knew some details about buried bodies or missing ones to share it with everyone. It gave a more of deep-rooted assurance of recurrence prevention due to the very wide educational effect, mainly through the assuring of impunity, in the sense that everybody who was found guilty was punished. And it wasn't only the people who killed. It was also in the cases of people of theft, who have stolen something, or vandalism. Now, the ICTR made an effort to make the justice and the procedures that were held in Arusha in Tanzania be accessible to the public. And in that way, they put some screens to actually to have the people see the trials live when they are in Kigali. But that still didn't make it as accessible because the language that the lawyers or judges might use are not very easy or understandable for a large portion of the population. While when it was done by the Gacaca courts, it was a gathering in the community with a simple language, not too much procedures, not too many bureaucracy or language that is too theoretical and too high for them. The second motive that I would like to emphasize was the choosing respectable people, as they called it, persons of integrity, to function as the local Gacaca courts. Now, they define the persons of integrity as such. Yes. Oh, yes. Okay. So those persons of integrity were chosen to be the Gacaca judges, and they were defined as individuals with high moral character who have not participated in the genocide, did not hold any divisionist beliefs, and had not been sentenced for more than 6 months in imprisonment. Since it wasn't possible actually to staff 12,000 Gacaca courts with legally trained professionals, Gacaca judges were elected by local communities, and they were trained to handle complex cases and to uniformly apply legal standards. This motive has actually helped in achieving few goals that I'm going to mention. One was speeding up the trials and accelerating the resolution of cases. It gave a confirmation to the Rwandan people that they could actually deal with their own problems, they could solve it on their own. Third was assuring that there was no impunity. Again, everybody who found guilty will be punished. And last, fostering reconciliation and integrity. Now, having people from the community being part of the process made it more meaningful to the people. And as I would like to actually quote Sam Rugege, who was the barrister back then. He described that achievement. Oh, great. So, congrats. He described it really beautifully, and he said, some may argue that there was no right process like in Western way. The opposite is right. If we have had professional lawyers, it would have been gotten to the classical courts where lawyers might get to complicated theories that people who only wanted to know if their loved ones were killed and were buried wouldn't understand. The third motive was where the cultural context was expressed was replacing the imprisonment sentences by community service. Now, alongside the establishment of the Gacaca courts, there was a suggestion by the government, and the government introduced an alternative to the imprisonment. Okay, I'm good. And those were offered to people who were actually connected or convicted with the genocide and genocide-related cases. That is to distinguish from what happens in other countries. Usually, the community services is offered to people with who are low-level offenders, but in Rwanda, it was introduced only for the genocide-related cases. The alternative sentence offered three main benefits. The first was the community service actually helped to alleviate the overcrowding in the prisons. There were a lot of people to punish, a lot of people sentences. If you had sent everybody to prisons, I'm not sure there was a place for everybody. Second, it could help reintegrate the convicted prison to their local community, as they could do some work with rebuilding cities that were destroyed, rebuilding whatever was going through the genocide. And third, it would provide a mean of indigent convicts to make reparations to the society and contribute to the national development. And here also I would quote the Minister of Justice, who also beautifully described that. So that was during our trip. He said, to rebuild the country, you couldn't do so with one person. And after you have 1 million people who have been killed, sending all perpetrators to prison could also be a big loss to the community. So to conclude, truth, acknowledgement, apology, assuring of no impunity, allowing reparations and reintegration back to the community, all achieved by the Gacaca courts, have led to reconciliation with, I'm not sure it was possible with achieving justice only. In my eyes, the ICTR expressed more of a punitive approach, and the Gacaca courts, due to the cultural context, actually has expressed and contributed to the more restorative approach. And here I'll quote Phil Clark on that, and he represents my opinion and his with the importance of the cultural context. In Rwandan context, the heart is the force of the unifying of In the Rwandan context, the heart is the force unifying the human being. It is the center of reception of outward impulses and the locus of interior movement. Emotions, thoughts, and will are interconnected and unified in the heart. The heart is inaccessible to others, but where the truth lies. Due to the violence experiences in their midst, the hearts have changed. According to that, I would like to say that only telling the truth would bring the reverse effect to change those hearts back to be accessible to others. And that could be fulfilled mainly and widely through the Gacaca courts out of all mechanisms. Now, honestly and objectively speaking, I would like to mention that after spending 2 intense days in Arusha, I came to realize that I discredited the ICTR quite fast. And I guess some others have. And thus, I would like to point out an outstanding achievement, actually, of the ICTR that the Gacaca court would never be able to achieve. The ICTR, through its punitive approach that I criticized, managed actually to hold trials of high-profile perpetrators that I'm not sure the Gacaca courts had the means to arrest or the mandate. That was justice made. I know it's time. Nonetheless, I am still convinced that the cultural context expressed in the Gacaca courts and in all the motives that I have emphasized has contributed to a bigger extent in achieving truth, reconciliation, peace, reparation of the victims. And I'll finish with a last beautiful description of that by the Minister of Justice that we met. That actually, that's what he said. Justice is not about lawyers, judges, court, and rules of the game. It's rather about fairness, transparency, the truth, the substance rather than the form. Not the law and the procedures. Justice is about restoring dignity of people and victims.
Thank you very much for excellent presentation. I think it's interesting to think of the two mechanisms, the ICTR and the Gacaca, as defining each other. And each of them has worked, and you see this especially in the Rwandan level where the Gacaca has defined itself against the ICTR. It's a reaction in many ways. So the emphasis there on the local, on the participation, on the lack of professional lawyers and judges is kind of in many ways a reaction. So perhaps without the one, there would not have been the other. And in this way, thinking about it, paints a more holistic picture, and a multi-level hybrid system is exposed in thinking about it in that way. Maybe that is a solution and not a either or kind of approach.